The sun rose creamy and golden over the pastures of Wheyfield, spreading a buttery sheen across dew-damp grass and warming the stone walls that circled the village like a half-finished crown. Every first Saturday in May, villagers said the same thing: perfect weather for rolling a wheel of cheese off Dead Man's Bluff. By 8 o'clock, ribbons and bunting flapped from the oak trees bordering Dandelion Lane. The scent of fried curds drifted from makeshift stalls, and people wearing everything from cow-print trousers to robes stitched with tiny cheddar wedges bustled toward the hill. Ned Rowland wiped his brow with a gingham cloth as he hefted the coveted prize, the 64-pound Supreme Double Gloucester, into the back of his battered cart. He rested one hand on the rind, feeling the cool, waxy surface, as solid and reassuring as the decades of dairying that had paid for his farm. For 6 years, Ned's cheese had been selected for the Grand Cheese Rolling Festival, and no matter how loudly his back protested, he still hauled the wheel to Deadman's Bluff himself. He believed the maker's muscle ought to see the job through right up to the moment gravity took over. A whistle sounded behind him. "Off to crown another champion, are we?" called Sheriff Lorna Ketch, leaning from the doorway of her tiny station. "If the hill doesn't split first," Ned replied. "Frost heave all spring. I swear Dead Man's Bluff is steeper every year." "Likely your knees are older every year," Lorna said, but she winked. "See you up there." Ned flicked the reins, and the cart rattled toward the crowd thickening around the hillside. A temporary fence of hay bales and red rope marked the course. Beyond it, Dead Man's Bluff dropped 200 feet to a rocky ravine that funneled into the river. The descent was brutal. Tufted grass gave way to gorse and shale, and if a runner misstepped, gravity turned playful, then merciless. That peril was precisely why spectators flocked from half the counties in the Federation. Today's favourite, Angus the Ankle Macready, paced on the ridge in a canary yellow singlet, shadowboxing to pump himself up. Angus was a wiry Scottish transplant with calves like steel cables and a grin that flashed faster than a strobe light. He'd won 3 years straight, snatching the cheese and, by rule, ownership of the wheel and its weight in prize money. No one minded. Watching him vault pitfalls and sprint with the wheel hoisted high was worth every bruised rib in the betting pool. As Ned unloaded the cheese onto a velvet-lined dais, a murmur travelled through the crowd. A new competitor stood near the starting line, Imogen Thurlow, a biology graduate student visiting her gran for the summer. Slender, calm, and wearing cleats rather than the usual plimsolls, she stretched with the precision of an Olympic hurdler. Some locals cheered, others whispered that she only entered to knock Angus down a peg. Ned's dairyman's instinct for tension prickled. He knew people lined up to pounce on glory as greedily as gulls descended on curbside chips. Yet he pushed aside misgivings. His job was to supply the cheese, smile for photographs, and avoid stepping on toddlers' toes. At 10 sharp, Master of Ceremonies Gordon Vellum climbed a crate in his powdered wig and bellowed, "Distinguished cheese lovers, we gather at the most hallowed hill in all Wheyfield." "Only hill," someone heckled. "To celebrate courage, foolishness, and dairy in equal measure." Laughter rippled across the hillside. "Competitors, to your marks." Ned positioned the wheel on its wooden launch cradle. Tradition demanded that the cheese start its journey with a ceremonial drum roll. He crouched behind the wheel, ready to give it that first nudge. "On my count," Vellum roared. 3! Spectators extended phones and field glasses. Ned tensed. 2! Angus bounced on the balls of his feet. 1! Chaos erupted. Instead of Ned releasing the cheese, Angus pitched forward, arms pinwheeling. He'd been standing 3 paces behind the launch cradle, nowhere near the cliff edge, but something invisible seemed to hook him by the ankle. He staggered once, twice, and then, before anyone could react, he plunged over. His scream sliced the air, ending with a dull, distant thud hidden by gorse. The crowd froze. Children stared open-mouthed, bunting fluttering like shocked hands. The cheese still sat pristine in its cradle. The festival grounds, usually rowdy by 1, were as silent as a cathedral after midnight. Sheriff Lorna barreled forward. "Stay back!" she barked, voice shaking but steady enough. She signalled 2 deputies to secure the cliff edge and radio the ravine rescue crew. Everyone knew rescues were rarely needed. The fall was unforgiving, and Angus's scream had cut off too soon. Still, no one dared pronounce him dead, while Lorna could cling to the word rescue. Ned found his legs again. He covered the cheese with a burlap cloth, as though shielding it from an obscene view. Strangely, a phrase looped in his thoughts. Tumbling before the wheel even rolled. Wrong order. Everything in cheese-making involved order: culturing, cutting, draining, pressing. Upset the order, the batch failed. Upset the order of traditions, and people died on a cliff. By noon, paramedics confirmed what the hush already knew. Angus Macready was gone, neck broken on a limestone outcrop. Vellum, cheeks as pale as cottage cheese, announced the festival suspended, pending full investigation. Tourists dissolved like froth from a soured pail, shuffling downhill, carnival rides abandoned mid-spin. Sheriff Lorna roped off the start line. 2 deputies scoured the ground. The only sign of irregularity was a smear of something slick, glinting faintly against the grass. 1 deputy sniffed it and recoiled. "Smells like goose grease." Ned's curiosity flared. Goose fat had plenty of uses: medicine, cookery, cottagers' remedies. But on a hilltop, goose grease under a sneaker sole would turn turf into ice. Lorna caught his gaze. "See something?" Only a question. Ned knelt, careful not to contaminate. A thin, oily streak curved through the trampled grass exactly where Angus had lunged. Beside it lay a crushed tin cylinder, no bigger than a lipstick tube, label scuffed to illegibility. Ned plucked it with 2 fingers and handed it to Lorna. She sniffed, eyes narrowing. Same stuff, pressurized dispenser. She pocketed it in an evidence bag. Sabotage looks likely. The festival's abrupt end meant a different sort of commotion blanketed Wheyfield that night. Pubs brimmed with speculation. Someone had murdered Angus Macready, everyone agreed, though they disagreed on why. Envy? Rivalry? Debt? Some muttered that Angus bet against himself on underground books, planning to fake a twisted ankle to collect. Others whispered that Imogen Thurlow had engineered his fall to win by default. Ned stayed sober, nursing seltzer at the rusty udder and listening. Farmers learn more by keeping quiet than by crowing. Close to midnight, he gathered his coat and stepped outside, the night smelling of lilac and rumour. He trudged the lane home, mind churning like a cream separator. Angus often trained at dawn near Ned's pastures. If someone planned sabotage, they'd need to test goose grease on turf. They'd need to know Angus's starting position. They might pilfer such grease from the kitchen of the Goose and Gander, where Imogen's gran volunteered. But could a research student plotting homicide be careless enough to drop the canister? Ned doubted it. He spent Sunday tending cows, but anxiety curdled his routine. By evening, he couldn't ignore it. He hitched his cart and drove to Angus's rental cottage. The door sat ajar, police tape sagging. Break-ins were unthinkable here, yet people's fear undermined honour. Ned pushed inside, calling, "Sheriff said I could fetch Angus's whey protein. He owed my lad a tin." A tiny lie, but the only witness was a photograph on the mantel. Angus mid-stride, grinning under the word champion scribbled in Sharpie. The cottage smelled of liniment, sweat, and, strangely, perfume. Ned rummaged carefully. In the wastebasket beneath the desk lay a sheaf of printed emails, invitations to appear on Gladiator Gauntlet, a televised obstacle course show. Angus had circled the salary figure, astronomical compared to turret anatomy, a phrase Ned misread until he squinted. Turns out, tour appearance. Atop the pile lay a countersigned contract. Angus planned to announce departure after today's 4th victory. Beside the contract was a note. "We can't let you take the wheel again. Think of our future." Ned's pulse thudded. The handwriting was round, loops like tiny cheese holes, distinct from Angus's bold scrawl. He pocketed a photo of it with his phone. Next morning, Ned hitched Snowball, his most even-tempered cow, to the milking stanchion. But his brain raced in circles. The note suggested a partner or lover. Only 2 locals were linked publicly to Angus. Imogen, who met him at last year's victory dance, and Peyton Larch, the festival treasurer who handled Angus's prize payouts. Rumour claimed Peyton and Angus shared more than ledgers. Ned finished chores and cycled to the festival office above the post shop. Peyton sat alone among boxes of souvenir mugs, eyes red-rimmed. "Hard days," Ned said gently. "You got a minute?" Peyton nodded. His sleeves were rolled to expose a tattoo of a goat balanced on a cheese wheel. Angus's dare months ago, Ned remembered. Tattoo parlour at midnight, half the village posted the photo. "Sheriff Lorna says sabotage," Ned began. "Any idea who'd sabotage the champion?" Peyton shrugged. "He riled people, promised folks he'd stay, then bragged he'd leave for TV. Town felt proud of him, you know. Then insulted. But who'd kill a man over that?" "Maybe someone financially invested," Ned suggested. Peyton's eyes flashed. "I'd lose income if Angus left, sure. His winnings cycle into tourism, but murder, hardly cash flow positive." Ned changed tack. "Did Angus owe debts?" "Only to his own ego." Peyton half smiled. "Reckon that debt came due." After awkward silence, Ned stood. "One more thing. See anyone carrying cooking spray at the hill?" Peyton frowned. Imogen had a silver thermos she kept waving around. Could hide anything in that. Ned left, pondering. Everyone pointed toward Imogen, a tidy suspect prepackaged like supermarket cheese slices. Too tidy. Tuesday morning, the coroner's inquest convened in Wheyfield Community Hall. Ned sat near the back with a notebook. Sheriff Lorna presented evidence. The goose grease canister, emails about Angus's impending departure, and testimonies that Imogen was near the start line holding a metal cylinder. Some jurors nodded as if verdict done. Imogen rose to speak. Her voice quavered but steadied. "My thermos held electrolyte drink. Test it. I have no motive. Angus and I dated briefly, yes, but I broke it off weeks ago. He gambled worse than he trained. Check his accounts." Murmurs fluttered. Ned felt a nudge beside him, Jonah Pike, the barman. He whispered, "Saw Peyton nursing a busted knee at dawn today. Slipped on goose scat behind the Goose and Gander. I said, 'Looks like karma,' and he turned white." Ned's mind clicked. Goose grease, goose scat. Maybe Peyton sourced goose fat behind the tavern where feral birds nested. But something bigger nagged him. Order. Peyton handled the purse and the wheel after each win. If Angus left TV bound, Peyton lost access to cheddar, both literal and figurative. And with Angus's winnings came untraceable cash tips Peyton could skim. But Peyton would need Angus out of the way, not just the wheel. Ned requested permission to address the inquest. Unorthodox, but villagers respected Ned's steady ways. Lorna nodded. He stepped forward, palms moist. Friends, I spend my life coaxing milk to reveal its nature. Curds separate from whey. Truth parts from falsehood the same. Look at the sequence of events. 1. Someone spritzed goose grease at precisely Angus's foothold. 2. The canister was left in plain sight. 3. Our eyes turned instantly to the new competitor, Imogen, because she stood closest with a cylinder. But killers rarely leave evidence so blatant unless they want misdirection. Consider who benefits if both Angus and Imogen fall under suspicion. Someone else in festival leadership. Peyton shifted, jaw clenching. Ned pressed on. I visited Angus's cottage. I found a note begging him not to take the wheel again. The looped handwriting matches a signature I've seen. He unfolded a donation receipt Peyton signed for the annual Goat Sanctuary drive. Loops identical as cheese holes. Gasps rippled. Peyton shot to his feet. You broke into Angus's house. I walked through an open door, Ned said, and I recognized the same perfume lingering there that your shirt wears now. You loved him, Mr. Larch. When he announced his departure, you panicked. Maybe you argued. Maybe he laughed off your concerns. So you planned to stop him today. Enough, Peyton shouted. You know nothing. Sheriff Lorna rose, hand on her holster. Mr. Larch, sit down. Peyton backed towards the exit. He promised me we'd go together, said we'd be on TV, split the purse. Then he signed a loan. Had the gall to joke he'd hire me as his pool boy. I gave him everything. I tattooed a goat on my arm. Tears streaked down his cheeks. I just wanted to teach him a lesson. Slipped the slope so he'd pull out of the race. I never meant... He gulped. He leaned too far before I sprayed. The hill took him. Deputies closed in. Peyton sank, sobbing. I left the canister because I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just ran. The inquest recessed. Outside, clouds curdled grey like spoiling milk, but villagers lingered, shaken yet relieved to have truth skimmed from rumour. Ned leaned on the rail overlooking Dead Man's Bluff. Imogen approached. Thank you, she said quietly. I'd have been indicted. Didn't feel right, Ned answered. A cheesemaker knows. Faults hide in the batch, not in the rind. She smiled wanly. Will the festival recover? Maybe. Traditions are like cultures. You can start a new one with the right starter. He gazed at the burlap-covered wheel stored in the sheriff's van. People will always chase the cheese. Question is whether we let the hill chase us. 3 months later, the festival resumed under stricter safety rules. Rubber-matted launch pads, medical teams halfway down the slope, and competitor background checks. Imogen volunteered as head of safety, the first woman to hold the post. Sheriff Lorna doubled security funding, though joked that goosefat now required a permit. On the revived festival morning, Ned placed a new wheel on the cradle. This one rinded in black wax to honour Angus. Spectators hushed as the drum roll began. Ned whispered to the cheese, "Let's keep order today." He released it. The wheel careened, riders sprinted, the crowd roared. Life, like cheese, was better when properly aged, but finally shared with everyone brave enough to taste.